Buonasera a tutti. I'm so glad we're all together here for a special evening and speaker. Thank you all for being here. We have a nice turnout. I'd like to thank Mayor for being here. He's always been so terrific with your presentation at the immigrant experience at our Waldock Museum of Local History when we had a wonderful exhibition on the Italian American experience. Now tonight we're going to have a wonderful speaker. As Waldock's Italian Americans have evolved from what was once a social aid organization in 1925 to today's Italian American social club of culture and fun, we are proud and privileged to have the presence of Mr. Andre DiMino this evening. Mr. DiMino is president of the Italian American One Voice Coalition. Tonight, our articulate and outspoken advocate for Italian Americans will continue to present his mission to educate all Americans of the complexities and the achievements of the Italians, from before immigrants came to build our great nation to present day. Andre DiMino's historic and current true knowledge of the Italian American experience has also been presented nationally with appearances on CBS, NBC, ABC, WPIX, and the morning show, New Jersey Morning Show, and also many interviews with the likes of Joy Behar and Greta Van Susteren, and too many others to mention right now, so please Google it later. So without further ado, we welcome you, Mr. Andre DiMino.
No, I appreciate the introduction. I actually appreciate being here tonight. Esther met me and she asked me if I would be able to come to the meeting, and I'm so happy to be here and learn so much about your organization with such a long history. That's great. Just a little bit about myself. Both my parents came from Sicily, so I'm first generation. I was born in Brooklyn. That's a suburb of Sicily. And we're in our section of Brooklyn in Bensonhurst. Not only was everybody from the Bensonhurst?
My father.
Okay, great.
Was you born in Parksy Avenue? That's where I was born.
No, my grandmother lived there, but I wasn't born there.
I was born there in Brooklyn too.
Oh, no, 18th and 60th Street. So, and not only was everybody from Sicily, they were all from Agrigento, which is the province that my parents came from. So I had no need to speak English as a child, and I didn't. So my first language actually is Sicilian. And Sicilian is a language. They call it a dialect, but it's actually a language because there's books written and so forth. And just to give you a little story, as you heard, I go and make appearances and so forth. That in one meeting, the governor of Sicily was there, and they knew about my background, and so they introduced me to him. And so I started speaking to him in Sicilian, and he looked at me and said, "Ma tu parli come un'antica." I speak like an antique, because if you think about it, if you have relatives and stuff, you're kind of frozen at the time that our ancestors came over. So my parents, my mother's family came over in the early 1900s, and my father came over in 1950. And, and I'm going to tell you this story because it's important to understand why I work so hard for the Italian American One Voice Coalition. From 1890 to 1910, in that period, about 5 million Italians emigrated to this country. That was out of about 27 million people in Italy. So if you just think about it, it's like a tremendous vacuum of people that came over here. So it was a tremendous migration. And when they came here, they were subjected to a lot of denigration, a lot of discrimination, and I don't know if you know, but the largest single one-day lynching that occurred in New Orleans in 1891 of 11 innocent Italian Americans. And that led, almost led to war between the United States and Italy. And so because of that turmoil that was going on at the time, and there were over 40 Italians that were lynched, but because of that turmoil, President Harrison declared the first Columbus Day in 1892, the 400th anniversary of Columbus' arrival in this part of the world, as the first Columbus Day, as an atonement and an apology, and also a day of patriotism. And that's why Columbus Day is so important to us today. It's got a tremendous history, and we owe it to our ancestors. We're meeting here the day after Columbus Day this year, which is, it was a great period of time for Italian Americans this past weekend, of course, and actually this whole month of October is Italian American Heritage Month. So, with that background, I could tell you that, there's been recent attacks on Columbus Day and Columbus They're really based on unfounded facts and false accusations that were perpetrated by Howard Zinn. He was a self-declared anarchist and Marxist that wanted to destroy our country. And the way that he did it was he wrote a textbook called People's History of the United States in 1980. And in order to attack our country, he decided to falsify facts not only about Columbus, but of our founding fathers and others. And unfortunately, that book has had legs. It's still being used in schools through the Zinn Education Project. But since that time, there have been a number of scholars and authors that, through primary sources, have totally debunked all the stuff that he had in there about Columbus. You know, as a great example, you know, he said that Columbus tried to wipe out the Taino tribe. It was just the opposite. He defended the Taino tribe against the Caribs that were cannibals. In fact, there's a person of indigenous heritage by the name of Rafael Ortiz, who's become a friend of ours. He wrote 4 books defending Columbus, and he traces his lineage back down to the Taino tribe. So that's why when you hear all this stuff about Columbus that's out there right now, it's just unfortunate that that's out there. Columbus is an iconic symbol to Italian Americans. You know, I remember my grandfather, when he came over, you know, he owned 3 fishing boats when he was in Sicily. But, you know, they told him the streets are paved with gold when you come to America. And he immigrated to America, and he thought he was going to have a fishing business. He couldn't have a fishing business. He ended up working on the docks, hard labor in New York on Pier 72 in New York City. And he told me when I was a kid, he told me how there was a list of what people got paid. And there were all the different ethnicities, and the Italians were on the absolute bottom. And he was spit on, and they called him names and so forth. But yet he knew that when Columbus Day came around, that was a special day that America welcomed Italians to this part of the country. So I feel a personal commitment to defending Columbus Day, and that's why our organization works so hard on this. Again, about myself, when my father was a scientist, and he had a number of inventions. And one invention he sold to a company that was based in Park Ridge, New Jersey. It was Burroughs Corporation, later on became Unisys. And I tell you this because you're going to understand why I'm so active now. But when he sold it, one of the things was they wanted him to become director of research. So we were living in Brooklyn, and my father started commuting from Brooklyn to Park Ridge, New Jersey, over here in Bergen County. And you know, that's a long ride every day. And every night, and that's when I learned how important the word disgraziato was, because every day he'd get out of the car, you just couldn't take it. So he told my mother, you know, we have to move to New Jersey. And so, in essence, moving from what was like a suburb of Sicily, we moved to Woodcliff Lake, New Jersey, which is like a Dutch farming town. Tremendous culture shock, you know, it's just unbelievable. You know, my parents were worried, you know, my father was so proud to be an American citizen. In fact, he always told me, you know, you were just born here. I chose this country because it's the greatest country in the world. And he instilled that patriotism in me. And when I went to school, I went to Our Lady of Mercy Catholic school in grammar school, and my mother was concerned that we would assimilate well, you know, and so therefore she told me, you know, don't speak Italian out of the house, you know, and she told the nuns, you know, Sister DiMino, who was shorter than me when I was in 5th grade, you know, every time I'd say an Italian word, she'd hit me with the steel ruler. So in essence, when I was a kid, now I know later on that they just wanted to do that because she wanted us to assimilate. But as a kid, I thought it was bad to be Italian, you know, because I was being told, don't speak Italian, you know, don't. So as a young child, I thought it was bad to be Italian. But later on, I realized why they did that, and they, you know, wanted us to assimilate. But I think that's what drove me to be so strong now, and why I got involved with the Italian American One Voice Coalition. The Italian American One Voice Coalition has been in existence for 32 years. It was founded not to have scholarships, not to have dinners, not to have parties. It was founded for one reason: to defend Italian American heritage and against all of the stereotyping and denigration that's out there, and unfortunately still there today. Dr. Manny Alfano is the person that founded the organization, and he fought every single day defending our heritage. And the way that I got involved was I was one of the youngest council persons ever elected in Woodcliff Lake. At 24 years old, I was elected. And the way myself and my partner, who was also Italian American, we beat 2 incumbent people. And we beat them by knocking on 1,650 front doors and introducing ourselves. And we won by a landslide. But the night I was installed, someone stood up and said, that's because he's connected. and it was in the minutes. The stereotype of being part of the mob, and it's right in the minutes. And unfortunately, that's what happens. But at the very next meeting, a guy shows up. He's in the public, and at the public portion, he raised his hands. And he said, that was terrible what you said about that young man. He fought to be on this council, and you stereotyped him with that just because of his ethnicity. And that was Dr. Manny Alfano. And that was years before he even founded One Voice. That's how committed he was. So that's why later on I became very involved with One Voice in order to carry on Dr. Alfano's tradition. Our 30th anniversary was a couple of years ago, and Dr. Alfano unfortunately passed away 2 months before our 30th anniversary. So he didn't see our 30th anniversary, but that's when I took over as president of the organization. So what we do every single day is we receive complaints and problems that occur regarding stereotyping, and of course about Columbus. That's something that we do all the time. But just to give you some examples, about a month and a half ago, we received an email from several people in St. Louis, Missouri, that a very popular DJ that's on in the morning made a very disparaging, misogynistic, kind of disgusting comment about Italian-American women. I'm not going to repeat what he said. It was terrible. And so the person sent us the clip of it. We heard it. And, our organization, we go through a couple of steps. The first step we do is we try to get whoever has done this to do the right thing. So I found out that the radio station was owned by a company that owned 5 radio stations, and the chairman of the board of the company was a woman. She wasn't Italian, but she was a woman. So I was able to get her information, contacted her, we sent her emails, we told her it was a terrible comment, and that it should be, there should be an apology for it. She listened to it, and I have to say she responded immediately, and she said that the following day that DJ would go on the air and apologize for doing that. That's an example where, they work with us and they apologize. But I'll give you another example. There was a car dealership, and it was in Minnesota. And they used mafia puppets to advertise their thing. And all the typical stereotypes. The puppets were Vito and Tony and all that. And it was they would knock people over the head to buy the car and so forth. So we contacted them and we tried to get them to take those commercials off the air, that it was stereotyping and so forth. And they used the word Italian. It wasn't a secret that it was about Italians. They didn't listen to us. So we have what we call our defenders. And these are people, maybe one of you would like to join our defender group. And these are like our Minutemen people, our people that react when we have things. So we found that the car dealerships get most of their business on a Saturday between 11 and 5 p.m. We got all the telephone numbers at that car dealership, every single number. They had like 11 numbers. We set it out to our defenders. And for that 5-hour, 6-hour period, we kept their phones completely tied up with complaints about those puppets. On Monday morning, the manager contacted us and said, we're pulling that commercial. We'll never do that again, and we'll apologize that we've done that. So it gives you 2 extremes of what sure. Now, when it comes to Columbus, of course, that's a situation that's just ongoing. And, they're switching a number of places to Indigenous Peoples Day instead of Columbus Day. Now, I have to tell you that, unfortunately, we probably lost about 6 states and about 100 different cities. But we've had some successes. Apopka, Florida, we were contacted that they had it on the agenda to switch it from, in the town, celebration of Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. We found out that there was, we got the names of all the commissioners, they called them commissioners down there of the town. And believe it or not, we had one African-American commissioner that really responded to us. We got an opportunity to explain to him how important Columbus was. He didn't know about the lynchings. We explained to him about the lynchings and why Columbus Day was so important. At the next meeting, he made a motion to preserve Columbus Day and celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day on August 9th, which is the international recognition of Indigenous people. So that was one of the successes. And we have other successes. We go down, and when we see a school system that's thinking about doing it, we go down to the meetings and we explain to them the problem. Probably the best example that we had was in Randolph, New Jersey, where they were going to eliminate Columbus Day. And we went down there. We had about 60 people go to the meeting, and they voted to eliminate Columbus Day. And we went to the very next meeting. We had about 125 people, and we made our comments and so forth. And then somebody made a motion, believe it or not, that, okay, let's not just do Columbus Day. Let's get rid of all the holidays. So they got rid of all the holidays, and they called them, day off. Well, we then held a press conference, and we had all the press there, all the networks and so forth. And the very next meeting, we had 425 people show up at the meeting. Had over 4 hours of testimony that was given at the meeting. And that night, they reinstituted all of the holidays, including Columbus Day. So that was probably the most extreme example. We've done that in Toms River, New Jersey, Glen Rock, New Jersey, and other places around the country as well. We are a nationwide organization, and we go after these things wherever we hear complaints about it. So that's what Italian American One Voice Coalition does and maintains that all the time. It's important for us because you'll see that they try to say that indigenous people were mistreated by Columbus, and we know that that's been disputed now by authors and so forth. And we said to ourselves, well, wait a minute, how else can we fight this? So you haven't heard this part yet, but it's a little bit of breaking news. About 6 months ago, we said, well, you know what, we should connect ourselves with some indigenous people. And so we found out about an organization called the Native American Guardians Association, NAGA. Now they're a nationwide Native American group, American Indian group, and they object to the cancel culture that's taking away the names like the Redskins and the Chiefs and the Indians from the sports teams, because they feel that that's eliminating their heritage. So we had meetings with them and so forth. We actually formed an alliance. And so now we're working together with NAGA and AGA. They've issued a letter saying that they support Columbus Day and they want Native Americans to be celebrated on another day, not to divide or not to put people against each other. And just yesterday, for the very first time, that resulted in about 60 Native Americans marching in the Chicago parade for Columbus Day. And they got a tremendous response, and you can see the video on YouTube. It's really very nice. And Frank Blackcloud was his name. He was interviewed on the parade route, and he talked about the new alliance that we have with Italian Americans. And we're having other organizations join with us, other ethnicities. In fact, I run a monthly meeting called a Solidarity Session, Bridging Cultures Against Cancel Culture. And so we have representatives of NAGA on there, and Italian American organizations, and other organizations. We had an Asian American group come on. On our December meeting, we have a Jewish group coming on. And the idea is that there is this cancel culture that's out there, unfortunately, trying to get rid of our history. When they started going after Columbus years ago, we said, they're going to start with Columbus, but they're going to go after all the other founding fathers as well. And sure enough, that's what happened. So, you can't wipe out our history. It's too important for our ancestors, and it's too important for us to have pride. You mentioned about our Italian heritage and all the things that we've done. If you think about what Italians and Italian Americans have contributed to this world, we shouldn't be denoted as mobsters and mafiosa, or because of shows like Jersey Shore, the young people shouldn't be the bimbos and buffoons that they had on that show. We fought that show very strongly, as a matter of fact. There was the first year that show was on, they did terrible things. They had the Italian flag on the bed, and they were having, sexual relations on the flag, and they were calling each other Guido, and there was Italian music playing. And we put together a group, and we got 11 national advertisers to pull their advertising from Jersey Shore. We then met with I personally met with the executives at MTV, and they said the show is just too popular. And even though they lost those advertisers, there were other advertisers. But we got a concession from them, at least in the second year, and after that, there were no more Italian flags and no more Italian music and so forth. So unfortunately, that show didn't go away. It's still around, but we were able to affect it. And you have other stereotyping. Where's the mayor? Mayor, as you probably know, a lot of times when somebody runs for office, and if they have a vowel at the end of their name, something always comes up about whether they're connected or something in their family. It's just unreasonable. And in fact, when you look at it, there is no fairness in media. I do this all the time when my TV appearance. So I challenge all of you to think of a positive Italian-American role in a movie or TV show. It's very difficult. We know what they are, but you can count them on one hand. Every time there's an Italian-American on a series or in a movie, they've always got something in the background of either mops or mafioso or bimbos or buffoons. It's very tough to find something of a positive role. That stereotype is just pervasive. What's that? Well, yeah, but you look, there were some things in there that they were not so nice either. Yes, it was funny and all that, but unfortunately, there's always that little side on whether he's doing something illegal or somebody's fooling around. It's tough to find them. I'll give you one. Does anybody remember the 1st October? 1st October was a show about a judge. He was an Italian, and he played. That was a very straight role that was played by Joe Mantegna, and Joe Mantegna. He always wants to do positive things when he's on as an Italian American. So he's one person that fights for it. Unfortunately, other actors, they say they can't get work unless they get the mobster roles. It's unfortunate it goes on. But the stereotype, it prevails. I was on the show with Neil Cavuto, and he's half Italian, and I was on there talking about the fact that there was a $425,000 grant that was going to be given to Jersey Shore for filming in New Jersey from the state of New Jersey, and we fought that. I said, not only is that show demeaning Italian Americans, but you're going to use my tax money to reward them. So we got to, at that time, Governor Christie, and he vetoed that. And so Neil Cavuto had me on his show, and Neil Cavuto does kind of business stories. And he said, Andre, we understand that, but isn't that taken away from a business that's working hard and so forth? So I explained to him and so forth, and so it was a good conversation. But then just before it was time for the commercial, he turned to the camera and he said, and you better watch out, he's Sicilian. So we went to commercial, and I said, Neil. He said, what? You just did it. He said, I did what? I said, you just stereotyped me like I was going to kill somebody. And I have to tell you, about 4 days later, I got a handwritten note. He said, I learned a lesson. Thank you very much. I'll never do that again. But you just see, unfortunately, it's just there. It's ubiquitous. It's out there. It's pervasive. And sometimes our worst enemies are Italian Americans themselves. So there's people out there that are mob wannabes. They think it's cool to be, associated with the mob. And it's unfortunate. We're such a rich culture, given so much to our world. We shouldn't be demeaned by being stereotyped in that way. So that's why the Italian American One Voice Coalition is there. We fight it all the time. We're called the coalition because we're a coalition of other organizations. For example, you're a social organization. There are fraternal organizations, there's charitable organizations. They may not have the, let's say, the processes to do what we do. So we ask them to join us as an organization member, and we're the bulldogs. They notify us of something, and we're the ones that go after them. We've got a good example. We have a legal study group comprised of constitutional attorneys, and when they take down all these statutes, we said we had to do something. And so we did something very big. The town of West Orange, New Jersey, took down the Columbus monument that was put up by Italians. And that was taken down, and we sued the city of West Orange and the mayor at that time for taking it down in federal court. And that, believe it or not, that suit was instituted in 2020, and that suit is still ongoing. They've tried to get it thrown out many times. We've beat them each and every time with our volunteer attorneys. And just recently, we achieved standing. Does anybody understand what that is? That's very important now. We've achieved standing, which means that we can officially continue this suit. And if we have to, we'll go all the way to the Supreme Court with this, because our legal study group determined, and you may not know this, Italian Americans are a cognizable group under the 14th Amendment. So therefore, you can't replace one organization or one group's honored person like Columbus with someone else's. That's discrimination. And that's where we're going on. That's why even though we have volunteer attorneys, it's very expensive for us to do this with all the filing fees and so forth. But if we have to, we're going to take it all the way to the Supreme Court and set the precedent to stop all this stuff about these statues that are being taken down. And in fact, where we met, we had a very nice ceremony when the Richmond, Virginia Italian American Cultural Association saved the statue that was painted and destroyed and thrown in a river. They pulled it out, they cleaned it up and fixed it up. And it was just a couple of weeks ago dedicated at the Rockland Sons of Italy Lodge, where now it's on permanent display. And if you got a chance, go up and visit. It's a beautiful bronze statue of Columbus. And you see, that's really what we have to do now. We have to preserve these statues that unfortunately were subjected to all these things. So that's what Italian American One Voice Coalition does. If any of you want to become one of our defenders, let me know. We have a website, iaovc.org. And right on the front page, doesn't cost anything. We have a free newsletter where you can keep up to date. It's named after our founder, the Alfano Digest. If you want to sign up for that, you'll get a free newsletter. If you want to join as a member, there's a membership form in there. And we look forward to any of you getting involved. So I'll open it up now. If anybody has any questions, anything that you'd like to ask me?
And
yes.
Can I ask you, I think I was part of Unica years ago.
Sure.
I think Unica, though, went to Washington, including my brother. And they fought the stereotype, and they won. It was my brother, Fred.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Who's your brother?
I should ask my brother.
Who's your brother?
Fausto Miraglia.
Okay.
You're probably thinking, because he was one of them
Okay.
to fought in Washington. It was a 5 of them.
Yeah, there were a couple of them.
Yeah. And he was the first one.
Good, good.
He
I'm
was
glad
a
he
young
did
guy.
That was
My
the,
brother's very ambitious.
Good, good.
The Westwood
Oh, the Westwood chapter? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
we fought for that.
Good. Yes.
It's not a question, but I just wanted to remark, you reminded me when in New Orleans there were 11 lynchings, that when the first black female mayor came into office soon after, she issued a formal apology, which was an article was written in Buddy Fortunato's newspaper, the Italian Tribune.
Yes.
So I thought that was notable, this
Yeah, that was a couple of years
finally,
ago.
yeah.
And I'm honored. They actually gave me a copy of the proclamation with the apology. I have that at
there
my-
you
at
go.
home. Yeah,
Okay, that's
That was
great,
an
yeah.
apology after hundreds of years, but we did get that.
Well, yeah, but
We-
finally it
yeah,
took
yeah.
it took a woman.
Yeah. Well, I don't. Does anybody know Charles Payne on Fox News? He's a business reporter on Fox News. He happens to be African American, and he had me on the show, and I was talking about discrimination and so forth. And at first, he was kind of resistant, but I gave him some of these examples and so forth. And then at the end of it, he said, "You know what? You have to do like the African Americans do. You've got to fight for equal. Even though that they have a stereotype, they should have a balance. They should have good people on, good Italian Americans." And he's become an ally now, and he's very cognizant of what we've gone through, and he compared it to how you try to get equal footing for Italians in a positive role. And that's what we'd like to see. Listen, we don't believe in censorship. We don't want to eliminate these shows and so forth. We just like a balance. We'd like to see, if you're going to have a negative role, there should be a positive role for Italian Americans as well. I'll give you an example. I design and manufacture medical electronics. I've got about 40 patents in the medical electronics field. And I went to do a demonstration in Utah to a bunch of medical doctors in a room like this. I explained the procedure and so forth. It was a technical medical procedure. And then afterwards, there was a lunch, and I sat down, and one of the guys leaned over, not joking. He asked me, "Are you carrying a gun?" Now, this is educated medical doctors. Another example, I was president of Unico National 2009, and we were having a convention in a hotel, and I got on the elevator, and one of the people that worked at the hotel got on the elevator, and I'm wearing my badge, saying Italian, and he goes, "Hi, you're with the Italian group." I said, "Yes." He says, "Isn't it funny you're having your convention here this weekend?" So why is it funny? The sheriffs are here. You imagine the mafia and the sheriffs are in the same building. So just like you said, I told them, I said, "That's inappropriate." I said, "You're stereotyping all the good people." I said, "As a matter of fact, Unico is a charitable organization, and you just, again," and he was embarrassed, and he was probably worried about I was going to complain. I didn't complain about him. Some of you might have young grandchildren or children, and maybe they want to go rent an apartment. And they go to rent the apartment, the guy looks at the last name and he says, "Ooh, gee, I don't want one of those bimbos and buffoons here." And they don't get that apartment. We had an attorney, you see you're an attorney, we had an attorney contact us and said he went to a partners meeting and he was up for partnership. And he said that one of the guys turned to him and he said, "You got a vowel at the end of your name. You'll never be a partner in this firm." It's blatant discrimination right to his face. So we get that, and we refer that to attorneys to handle it and so forth. So even though they tell me to lighten up, I'm not going to lighten up, and I hope you don't. So thank you very much.
Thank you.